Welcome to the Best Boys podcast, where we pull back the curtain on what it's like to be independent filmmakers. I'm Cody McLeod Rogers, writer, director, and producer.
And I'm Tristan Au, director of photography and producer.
And we are the creative directors at Foreground Productions.
If you like what you hear, like and subscribe to the podcast for more.
Well, welcome to the first episode of the Best Boys podcast. Very exciting.
Absolutely.
And today we're going to talk about getting your first gig, right? What that is like, whether it's creative narrative or commercial or music videos or whatever it may be. How do you get that first gig?
Yeah, I think this is the best first topic for a podcast because it's like, this is where you start. This is where you actually start becoming a filmmaker. You moving from like your bedroom, filming stuff with your friends to like actually going out in the real world, being on set for the first time. So what better way to start?
And it's really important to note that for this podcast, Tristan and I are young professionals. We're just out of film school. We have a lot of experience in a lot of different things, but we're very much so at the ground level of this filmmaking world. And so we wanted to, in all of our episodes, take you along the ride of things we have learned, things we're actively learning.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Things we are doing. And so as we sit here in Tristan's Power, Corruption, and Lie shirt and me in my Kool-Aid shirt, we're gonna share everything that we can about getting your first gig.
Yeah.
I think maybe what was your first gig? Like when was the first when was the first time you first kind of picked up a camera with an idea to maybe you make money this way? And then when was the first time you actually made the money?
Right.
If that kind of makes sense.
That's a good. So like for a lot, for the most part, I started more in photography. So that was like, and I think you also did a lot of photography. Yeah. And photography is a really good way to make money. I started in like event photography, and that was like the first time I actually got paid for something. But the first time I was on set, like in a production, was for a corporate shoot. And it was through like the most random connections. It was through a volunteer position. So
okay.
I had to go to this middle school. It was like a summer camp or like summer school, video introduction to filmmaking thing. But it's summer school, so these kids don't want to be there.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to teach kids, how to use cameras. I'm not getting paid for it. It's volunteer. It was through a professor. And then at the end of this sort of volunteer work, we were going to shoot a music video in the school. And so with the music video, the professor brought in a bunch of like actual industry people. So like, a DP, a bunch of other connections that they knew. And so after shooting the music video, which the music video was shot on like a, C500 Mark II, dolly, brought in lights, a production.
Yeah.
And so that was my first time really seeing like, okay, this is kind of a set. Not really, but kind of a set.
Sure. So it wasn't until college.
Yeah. Oh my God. I didn't even mention. Yes. So that was in right before, I think that was my sophomore year of college.
Okay.
Like the summer of my sophomore year or the summer of my junior year, maybe before I started junior year. So I was, already after 2 years of being in college, I hadn't been on set. But mostly it was because of the pandemic.
And what exactly on the set did you do?
Oh, I was just a hand. So I was just a PA.
So just like PA.
Yeah. That's where you start, right? Yeah. And like, I was just a PA. I would just move stuff. When you're a PA, you mostly just move stuff around, right? Yeah. So I was just there to just do whatever, set up things. And then after the shoot, I reached out to, basically everyone there. I think that's like the most important thing you can do is just like email people, whatever, right? Be like, hey, it's cool working with you. I know nothing. Yes. I would love to work with you again, right? Please. Yes, like
please.
And so, I reached out to the DP, and he's like, cool, I'll follow you on LinkedIn, which is like, okay, that's
for real. That's LinkedIn.
Now that,
serious stuff.
And then I also emailed another guy who was there just to help out, and he just like blew balloons and, maybe put a light up here and there. But he was a line producer for a corporate video company and was the one who actually was like, oh, yeah, I actually do have something that you could be on as a PA. So that was how I got on set for the first time, through like, in honesty, like the volunteer thing. I don't know like why I did it, like why I chose to do it.
Yeah.
Because at first I was like, this is not exactly a great use of my time, but I was able to meet people through that. And
You knew it was good.
yeah,
I mean,
and
it's
like,
networking, it's connecting.
yeah, when you're starting out, you just have to start somewhere. So like, even if it is like a volunteer position where you're not getting paid, or yeah, summer school, like
Yeah,
these kids
yeah.
do not want to be there. You never know what opportunities could arise. And eventually, that DP, I worked with him again. I was his first AC for a shoot recently. And, this is 2 years after I'd worked with him before as a PA. And he's like, Tristan, you really know your stuff, man. Like, there was respect. So, like, and it was because I had been on set now for like 2+ years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, it all comes around,
Yeah.
But you just have to find a way to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what about you? So I know you. So you have a lot of experience in doc.
Yes.
So like, did you have? What is that like? Working in doc and.
Yeah, so my first my first paid gig was when I was 16. Um, but even before that, I grew up with grandparents that loved photography. They were like very much so hobbyist photographers. And my dad, when I was super little, actually had a fishing show on the Outdoor Channel called Midwest Bass Fishing and Hunting Adventures. So I grew up kind of just always around these cameras. And the older I got, the more infatuated I became with like capturing those still moments, and I really got into photography. And when I got into middle school, I saw it as a way I can maybe make some extra cash here or there, but nobody ever really paid me to do anything. Maybe my mom would give me like $20 to like photograph my brother's high school graduation
Yeah,
photos,
yeah.
or something like that, right? But my first paid gig, I went to something called the Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership Conference, which is just these kids that come from different high schools and you learn about leadership and leadership skills and that kind of stuff. And I just felt really impassioned like after going to that conference.
Yeah.
And I knew that I wanted to do filmmaking, which is a whole nother story, but I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I needed to start making money just because I was 16 and, that's what you start doing at that age. And I started a fake production company called Edge Studios, which is a very state-of-the-art name.
I'm sure there's other Edge studios somewhere.
Well, you see, we were on the cutting edge,
Oh, okay.
of what filmmaking would be, which is, was me and my Canon 7D,
Yeah.
and yeah, hand me down from my grandparents. But I had told. I'd kind of gotten the word out there that I wanted to start being paid to make money. And I had done a little bit of like free work for our theater department. I acted growing up. I was in theater. Shocker that I do film now, but
The
whatever.
pipeline is very strong.
Yeah, it's a strong pipeline. I'd done a little bit of video for our theater program, like a video.
Yeah.
But another kid who was in that program, his dad was the village administrator for our town. I'm from this tiny little town just outside of Chicago called Coal City, Illinois. And he was the village administrator, and they were working on a project with the Grundy Economic Development Council to basically build an intermodal, like a train intermodal for bringing on, cargo for trains and that kind of stuff in city limits. And they needed a video to summarize this project and make it accessible to the public. And so I was hired to make that video. And that was my first gig, was this industrial train video for this tiny little municipality of Coal City. And that from there, it just started becoming more and more, and I started traveling around the United States doing more environmental documentary type work. I traveled to Guatemala and did that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's how I got my first gig. It was 100% just talking to people, getting, my name out there, being very clear about what I want to do, telling
Yeah.
people, hey, I want to do videos for money. And especially if you come from like a small town, something like that, there's not a lot of video production companies in small
Mm-hmm.
towns,
Mm-hmm.
but people still need that content. And so if you're in any type of community, using your community as a way to start that process, it's just like when you go to do your first short film, which we talk about in episode 3 of this podcast, by the way. Anyway, like when you go to do your first film, when you go to do your first film, there's kind of the only way to get money is through friends and family.
Yeah.
It's the same idea with getting your first gig, getting your first job. You have to use people you know and trust, people you know who are going to want to help you pursue your dream and your career. And for you, that was a professor.
Right.
For me, that was the dad of one of my friends, right? You
Yeah.
just need to look right in front of you and analyze what's around you, because the answer in terms of finding your first gig is probably there.
Yeah.
You just have to work that network.
Absolutely. I think the more you just talk to people and just make aware, like, I'm interested in doing this, I have these set of skills, like, what's a way that we can produce something?
Yeah.
Like, one of my first things I ever like produced for somebody else, like a client, I guess, was for my dad, because he wanted a video about polo. He plays polo. And so I remember filming this, I forgot what I shot it on, but I filmed this like epic slow motion polo video for him, and I edited it and I cut it. And then I think I also filmed one in real time, and I cut it to like Gimme Shelter by the Rolling
Oh my
Stones,
God. Classic.
which I obviously had the rights for to use.
Yeah, of course. Like $6 or $7.
Yeah,
Quick process.
and similarly, when I was in the Navy, the Singapore Navy, I also like I filmed content for them. Like I took photos for them. I filmed content because like those were my skills.
Yeah.
And like I made it aware, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you can produce something for us. Why not?"
Well, that's the other big thing is all that is stopping you from getting your first gig is simply saying this is my first gig. So whether or not it was for your dad and somebody actually paid you, or whether or not you're doing something for the Navy or somebody's paying you $500,000 to make in industrial, like whatever it is, you can just call it a gig.
Yeah.
It's in your control. It's just like, well, am I a professional or am I not? You are.
Yeah.
Like, and it's all
absolutely.
about how you market yourself,
Absolutely.
And so to us, we have these defining moments of when we got our first gig, but ultimately, like at the time, it didn't feel anything special.
Yeah.
It was just kind of what was happening in the moment.
Yeah.
And to get that, you need to market yourself as a professional. And it's as simple as calling yourself a professional
Absolutely.
videographer or director or whatever it is. You give yourself the title.
Yeah, I think you have to like sort of, it's really easy to feel like the imposter syndrome, and feel like, oh, I'm not a professional, or I'm not using professional gear or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you're making something for somebody else, that's your client,
Yeah.
and then you as the profession, as someone producing
Yeah.
it, right? So like, yeah, I mean, I liked what you said, where it's like, it didn't feel like a big step when I went to like, because when I went to that first shoot, that first corporate shoot, to me, it didn't feel like a huge leap, like, oh, I'm a professional now. It just felt like the next step in like my journey.
Yeah.
Albeit a great big step, because when I got there, I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
But, like, it didn't feel like I was like suddenly, it just felt like a next step.
Yeah.
Versus like the first step.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. So we talked a bit about, how we got our first gigs, where we sort of started. What do you think are like some of the challenges of like getting that first gig, or at least like making that next step as a professional?
Yeah. I mean, the number one challenge is getting over the fear of actually talking to somebody about it, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Am I prepared to be a professional? Am
Yeah.
I prepared to do my first gig? People might be paying me money. Am I going to produce a good enough product?
Hmm.
And if there's that fear that's stopping you there, you're not going to send the cold email. You're not going to call. You're not going to ask your mom, "Hey, do you know anybody who like is looking for video?" You're not going to do those things because you don't feel confident in your skill set. And I think there's several important things to recognize at this point is that is totally okay.
Hmm.
And so it's just getting over that concern that you won't be good enough, which I know is super, super, it's very difficult to do, but that is the first big challenge.
Hmm.
And just recognizing that it is good and recognizing that you do have the skill set and just trusting that.
Yeah.
And then once you get over that hump is, okay, how do you actually get somebody interested in your product
Hmm.
that you can offer or service, I guess, more
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You can cold email, you can cold phone call, you can send LinkedIn messages, you can show up in person,
Hmm.
knock on a door of a business. Hi, my name is Cody. I'm 17 years old. I'm a student at Coal City High School. I'm trying to start my business. We do video production, and I'm trying to use this money to go to college so I can get my film degree. Is there any type of video services that I can provide for you? It can be a testimonial. It could be headshots. It could
Hmm.
be an overview video, right? It could be just
Right.
whatever it is, right?
Right. Right.
Like you need to be open to providing an adequate service that they actually want. You can't go in saying, I'm going to make a music video for State Farm. Like that's
Yeah.
that's that's not. You don't necessarily know what the other people want. And so you need to be open to what you're willing to provide, and then really thinking about the different niches. For example, and we can talk about growing your business and those types of things later, but when I first moved to Washington, D.C., I didn't know anybody here. Like, I
Hmm.
literally knew nobody here. And I was trying to run my business and I was trying to make money. That's how I made money, was with my camera. And, I was thinking, man, this is such a saturated market.
Mm.
Right? It's not like Coal City, like I mentioned before, where nobody there is doing video production, right? In DC, there's a million production
Yeah.
companies, and
Yeah.
even more so, they're all doing industrials.
Yeah.
They're all doing commercials.
Hmm.
So who can you target that isn't saturated? And you have to get really kind of creative about it. And I kind of found my niche within this like comedy magician world.
Yeah.
Like nobody was reaching out to these extremely talented mentalists and magicians and comedians
Hmm.
because, quite frankly, I don't know why. Probably just because maybe magic isn't the first thought people have when it comes to doing video production.
Right.
You
Right.
know what I mean?
Right.
But I got hundreds of rejections, or even worse, just nobody responds, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But then I got one person who, like, they responded to my email. They hired me to come. I
Hmm.
worked my butt off. I provided a much greater service than what was being paid for, but I really wanted to impress this client.
Yeah.
And then they started hooking me up with all these other clients, and it's been a return client for, gosh, almost 4 years now,
Right. Right.
right? And so it's finding, okay, where where is the market not saturated? Which sounds like a goofy question, but really think about it. Like
Hmm.
farmers, I don't know, do farmers need video work? Maybe, but
Probably.
probably, right? Like, do little
Yeah.
pumpkin patches
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
need
Exactly.
video work? Probably, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
just
definitely.
getting outside of what the immediate thoughts, the few big challenges that I face and I think are most prevalent is one, getting over the fear
Hmm.
to actually have confidence in your services, and just knowing that that confidence isn't just going to show up one day when you wake up.
Yeah.
It's not going to be there, and you just need to push yourself to actually do it.
Hmm.
And the next big challenge is getting people to actually either accept your services or become interested in them in the first place. And it's a numbers game. You have to knock on as many doors as you possibly can, send as many cold emails as you possibly can without wearing yourself out, right?
Yeah.
Which I know we're both bad at, and
I
we
mean,
can talk
it
about
can be
later.
super tiring to just put yourself out there.
Exactly, it
Yeah.
is. And then that last challenge, kind of built into getting people to actually want your services, is finding that niche, finding where the market is maybe untapped in your area. And I don't know what that answer is for you. Like I said, for me, it was
Hmm.
like Mentalist, magic, and comedy.
Yeah.
And who knows what it could be for you? You just
Right.
have to investigate and be just sit down and think about all the crazy things. And maybe the craziest one needs video work.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
Absolutely. I think also, you know, it can be very difficult to find the networks or to find people that you want to talk to.
Absolutely.
I
I
think
mean, how do
the
you find that network? Or how
yeah
did you find the network? I mean, you have a very interesting
I
story
think
with finding a network of people.
I think before so I met a bunch of people obviously through that initial gig, and then working in corporate video um, definitely sort of gave me access to a lot of like the professionals around the area, and finding out that like this is the kind of work that's around here. This is like mostly what's gonna get you paid, but other people are also being creative too, and they're still creating stuff that I want to do, right? The narrative, fiction, that kind of stuff. I think in terms of my network, I most of it, yeah, again, is from the corporate world, but a lot of it is just you know creating a network of people that are like you, that are young, that you go to school with, that are like that have the same sort of aspirations and goals that you want, that you have, and sort of learning together about it. I think the some of the strongest networks are the ones that are sort of horizontal to you, that are on your
Mm-hmm.
same plane
Yeah.
versus like above you, like vertically. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, versus yes, we're always looking up at all these people, but we can also look side to side, right? Like, who are the other people that you can work with that are on the
Mm-hmm.
same level
Mm-hmm.
or same sort of level of experience? And talking about experience, I think it can be really difficult to jump into a gig and feel prepared. Especially for me, working corporate video for the first time on a set, I was I was very I was afraid of it, right? Because I had never been on set before, don't know what to expect. I got the call sheet, read it like 10 times, and I was like, I remember bringing like a little roll of gaff tape
Mm.
as like I was the PA.
Prepared.
I was
You
the
were
PA,
prepared,
right?
is what you.
Yeah, I was the PA, so I don't know why I would need
You
gaff
were like
tape,
checking yourself in the
but
mirror with like
no,
gaff tape on your belt
yes.
loop.
Seriously, like I had a little carabiner and a gaff tape on it, like, and I show up and there's a whole milk crate filled with gaff tape. I'm like, oh, I guess they don't need my gaff tape, right? And even the producer's like, oh, you didn't have to bring your own gaff tape, like use ours.
Well, but that definitely would have impressed a producer, which again, we talk about being prepared for your
Yeah,
first set in
yeah,
episode 2, which you
yeah.
all should check out. But still, you impressed them.
Yeah,
Like your first kind of experience with that producer, because you had your gaff tape on your carabiner,
yeah,
you impressed them.
right.
And that's key to building your network.
Yeah, or at least, I mean, at least you stand out.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I think the most important thing on a set is making sure that everybody knows your name, knows who you are, right? And hopefully remembers your name by the end of the day. If they can remember your name by the end of the day and you were the PA, nice. You did a great job, honestly. That's something that I always think about. So earlier you mentioned, sort of the shifting in mentality as a filmmaker, going from like amateur to professional, right? What do you think is like the mentality you should bring, like when you are making that transition, like when you are finally thinking about yourself as a professional, as someone that can produce a product or want to get on set?
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting because I've actually gone through kind of 2 to 3 stages of this.
Mhm.
Because, like, as you mentioned before, and as we talked about, I used to do all documentary.
Right.
And now I work on a network documentary series that's like, I'm a producer on, and I still do that all the time. But if people were to ask me to market myself, I would say narrative. And so I've kind of had to go through a whole nother process of this because narrative is a different world. And when you're making kind of that jump to professional, even if it is horizontal from one aspect of the job to another, like one genre or the next, there's almost this sense of starting over, right? Like, don't forget everything you've learned, and you shouldn't invalidate those experiences at all. Use those,
Mm.
to grow yourself, but you need to go back to this say yes mentality. You have to earn the right to say no, at
Mm.
least at the beginning. And
Absolutely.
there's still a line between overworking, right, and saying no and saying yes all the time. There's still that line that exists, but you have to earn the right to say no. And it's just really important when an opportunity comes up, whether it is a student film or whether it is a very well-paying industrial. And when I say industrial, I'm meaning a commercial project for a restaurant or business or healthcare or something like that. Those
Mm.
are usually considered industrials. Um, you just have to say yes.
Hmm.
Nobody's going to walk through the door and say, "Do you want to direct a $500,000 commercial for Adidas?"
Hmm.
No, right? Like, you're probably going to get asked to be a PA.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll just be asked to be there,
Hmm.
like, and not even get a title,
Yeah.
but still saying yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. I I said yes to the volunteer, summer school thing, right? And
And
like
now
if
we're
I
here.
didn't say, and the only reason I did was it was the summer. I was like already kind of working, but like I had nothing to do, so I was like, whatever, man. Like yeah. And now I'm here, and
Mm-hmm.
like I know a lot about production, like because of it, and I've been able to really feel like a professional
Yeah.
because of that. And,
Yeah.
and then if you know, I think you have to in the beginning you have to understand that like you just want to learn, like you just
Mm-hmm.
want to go out there and try things and experience the good and the bad about video production, about gigs. Like, yeah, I know people who have they built furniture for 12 hours
Mm-hmm.
for a shoot. Like,
But they were there, and
but they
that's what
were, yes,
matters. Yeah.
exactly. Like, and once you learn, like, some gigs are going to be bad and some gigs are going to be good, sort of when to do them and when not to
Mm-hmm.
do them. Like you have to learn through experience in the film industry. I feel like you can't just read about it, watch YouTube videos about it, which are still very helpful, but
Yeah.
you have to go out there and experience it. Every situation, every journey for every filmmaker is going to be different. How you get to where you want to be, whether it's director, DP, art department, sound, you have to go out there and experience where those things start. You
Yeah.
have to be the lowest of the call sheet. You can't just skip 3 or 4 different roles. Like you can't just market yourself as a DP, as like a director from the
And
beginning.
yeah, I do think there is, with that, the reason it gets difficult to like jump on the call sheet or, well, I don't want to be a PA, I just want to be a director. Again, like if it's your I'm a firm believer of whatever you want to be, like market yourself that way. But just know that the way directors and DPs and producers and above the line and department heads, people, the way they get respect is because people know they started at the bottom, right? Like the whole process of being a PA to being a Steven Spielberg or, whatever your favorite director is that process of starting at the bottom isn't like a hazing. It isn't
Hmm.
like well, I was at the bottom, so you have to be at the bottom. That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
Being on set and learning how films function is a very technical thing. you don't just sit down and be like, oh, I want to make a film. And then these films are made, right? Like films are made in spreadsheets.
Yes.
Films are made in very specific orders and very specific routines and technical things. And so the reason everybody starts as a PA is because that's where you learn the interworkings of how a film set functions.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you're going and getting granola bars and waters, but you're also working with talent. You're also working with department heads. It's a way to see how everything functions. And so I know, like, this is something I've struggled with too. Like, you don't want to be the PA. Who really does? Who
Mm-hmm.
grows up in the film industry thinking to themselves, "Oh my gosh, I can't wait to be a PA"?
Yeah.
Nobody, right? But it's important to understand that you start that way not because other people want to put you down,
Mm-hmm.
but it is the best way to learn how a set functions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And when you're there, you have to ask questions.
Yes. And you need to know when to ask questions. And I think that's something we're also going to talk about I think in the next episode is what's it like to, be on set, and what's it like, how do you, sort of conduct yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a really important point is know when to ask questions, know like know where to, like, when not to overstep and get in the way of the production. You do not want to be, you don't want to hinder the production. You want to be there and do your job and still like learn and be out of the way,
Yeah.
right? Like, and that then people will be like, okay, this guy is great. Like,
Yeah.
he did his job and he was curious about it, and I like that. And honestly, all the professionals that I've worked with admire a PA or a grip or somebody, low on the call sheet who asks questions and who is passionate, right? And they're curious. They just want to know, you know, like subconsciously a lot of people, DPs, directors, they like talking to like PAs and stuff about this stuff. They like, but when I DP projects, I love talking to my assistant cameras about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because I'm passionate about it and they are too. And like, if it's an opportunity for them to learn something or for me to learn something, yes, like that is naturally what environments on film sets should be like.
Yeah. You have to use, I mean, speaking of environment, you have to use the environment around you to further pursue your dreams and your passions, just like asking everybody on the set all these different questions right there around you. That same idea transfers to wherever you may be and trying to get your first gig.
Yeah.
Right. We talked about using your network, finding the niche, finding those types of things to find your first gig. You don't have to move to LA or to New York or Toronto or these days Ireland, right? Like a lot of production is happening in Ireland.
London.
You don't have to move those to those places to get your first gig.
Mm-hmm.
If it's something you really, really, really want to do because you love the environment, go for it, right? But you don't have to move to a filmmaking hub to get your first gig as, a independent contractor, as a production company, or as somebody trying to climb the ladder through film. You don't have to move. Just look around you.
Exactly.
Look at the foreground. One
that's
one might say.
Absolutely. Look at what's right in front of you.
Exactly. That may or may not be included. We'll
like
see.
that.
Producer Shelby is that included.
I think that's pretty funny. I think that's pretty funny. No, but yeah, filmmaking is happening everywhere. Like that's the beauty of it. Like people are gonna create, or people, in some cases we have to. Like there's demand, there's work, there's still work, right? So it's just finding where,
it's there.
Yes, you just gotta find it.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of productions always happening. They could always use an extra hand.
Yeah.
Believe me, the amount of times like I wish I had an extra hand on set, like I couldn't count, right?
Yeah.
You always need, like, productions are always looking for people to help out, to be an extra hand, to get lunch, somebody with a car that can like just drive around, you know, and like grab the coffee. There is demand. Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about our different processes here and different things we've learned along the way. But as we wrap up this episode, if there were 3 things that you were to do right now, if you were starting over right now, what would those 3 things be?
That is a great question. I'm glad I don't have to start over because yeah, it's so tiring and it's scary at first, right? And I think before I start with the first thing, I guess this doesn't count because like a thinking, like a thought,
Okay,
like
doesn't count.
like
No,
this is the
does
pre,
not count.
which is first identify what you want to do, like identify your sort of end goal. If you don't really know that, that's okay because you know in this filmmaking journey, things are going to change, you know, you're going to get an opportunity that's going to lead you somewhere else, right? But at least know generally sort of what you like or what you want to get into.
Yeah.
And that will help you sort of narrow where to search. So for example, I want to be in production. Now, I don't know if that's in lighting, camera, sound, production design, whatever, right? But I want to be on set versus in an office, in a writer's room, blah, 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 in an editing bay. So I want to be on set. So now that I've identified I want to be on set, the first thing I do is I would probably look at my network and reach out to my network. That's one thing. Look and reach out to my network that I already have before I search, you know, for other places. And sort of like you said, you know, ask around, hey, does my dad know somebody who works in film or video? Randomly, and maybe they have a set that I could jump on as the PA, as you know, the lowest on the call sheet. Am I in film school? Do my professors know, or are they in video production, or do they know people? Right. Analyze like sort of your network that already exists.
Yeah.
And then reach out to a wider range of people, a wider sort of range of people. And I think a way that a lot of people use nowadays is actually like Facebook. I don't use Facebook at all because that is the most like is so old. But one thing I will say is that Facebook groups, there are a billion Facebook groups out there for freelance filmmaking, gig work, second shooters. Everyone's looking for a second shooter for a wedding or or a photographer, or you know, for headshots or for grad photos or something like that. People are looking for PAs. You know, search up groups in like, let's say you live in, I don't know, Savannah. Search up Savannah filmmaking. You will probably find something, you know, in that group. Like you'll probably find a group that exists like that. And there will be people posting, you know, I need a PA today. I need this today, blah, blah, blah. It may not be paid, you know, but if you had never been on set before, you again, like we said earlier with the say yes mentality, you just do it, you know, and you just get there. And maybe it's terrible or like a total like mess, but at least you were there and you saw the mess. And even when sets are a mess, you learn from that. You're like, okay, when I eventually run a set, at least it's not going to be like that, right? Yeah. It's always a learning opportunity. And I think the third thing would be, the third thing. Let me think for a sec. Those are already 2 really good things. The third thing, can we good attitude? I think the third thing would be humble. Like, let me start over. I think the third thing would be to change. No, not change. Because I want like an action word. Like, be humble is not an action word. Keep learning. Yeah, that's a good one. I think the third thing also, I think the third thing would be that I would just keep learning. I would search up things that I would want to do, maybe on YouTube, or like talk to people, like reach out to people and just ask questions. You know, get on set and ask questions, talk to, you know, professionals and be like, hey, you know, can I buy you a coffee and talk to you for an hour about what you do? Yeah. And, you know, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does, right? And once you make those connections, you know, make sure to cultivate those connections and check back in, right? Like, I have a buddy that I like meet for coffee like maybe like once every like 3 months.
Yeah.
But even though that's not very often, those meetings are like an hour because or longer because we just talk about stuff. You know, it's like show that you care and that you're willing to learn, and always just keep learning. Always be open-minded, be humble. You know, don't go into a gig thinking that you're better than or more talented than any of these people, because one, you probably aren't because you're starting out. Two, everybody is there just to work, and they all care about this stuff. And it does not service anybody to come in with like a mindset that like, oh, I'm just, I know more. Knowing more does not equate making better products.
Yeah.
So yeah. So those are sort of my three-ish things. What about you? What would you do?
So if I was starting over, which again, quite frankly, don't would prefer not to, because it is hard. If I was starting over and had to do these metaphorical three things, I think like what you said is really important. Knowing where my end game is, knowing what I want to do, and kind of building the steps backwards, I think is very important. And then from there, the first thing you have to do is understand the why. Why do you want to do this in the first place? This art making, this filmmaking is extremely personal and very difficult. It doesn't matter if you're a PA or a director or a producer or a writer, whatever it is, it's very personal, and you wear your heart on your sleeve a lot. And if you don't understand why you're doing it in the first place, and it's just because maybe you want to be a movie star, I think, there's just lots of introspection that needs to happen to understand why. Then once you understand why, kind of also like what you said, is reaching out to your network. One of the main parts of this podcast is that we're actively going through these steps right now. We just graduated film school. We're figuring things out for ourselves. We have lots of experience and we've done lots of things, but we are still the ground floor bare minimum to getting into this industry. So but everywhere around you, you have a network. Use LinkedIn. Use your alumni network. Oh my gosh. Connect with every single alumni you can in the industry on LinkedIn. You can search by school if you've gone to film school. Heck, if you've gone to school, but it wasn't film school, but now you're doing film school, still connect to those alumni,
Absolutely.
And then asking around, hey, Dad, did you go to college with anyone who liked cameras? Just like out of curiosity. Like, just really use what you have around you. Send those cold messages. Get over the fear of sending those cold messages.
Right.
And the third thing is, these are all kind of just like, I guess, attributes, but like having that confidence and humbleness, yes, but that confidence of, again, sending those emails. That's a specific thing you can do. You can send a cold email to a client that you want to do work for. You can do that. You need the confidence to do that, and then having the confidence to pitch yourself and be confident in your skills and actively talking about who you are and what you do and selling yourself as what you want to be is the last thing, is really important.
Yeah.
Tell the little old ladies at church that you are doing video.
Yeah.
Just tell everybody.
Yeah.
And those are my three things.
Yeah.
That I would do.
I think, always remember you are a professional. That this is your job.
Yes.
This is your job.
There's no definition of job saying that 51% of your income has to be from that thing, right? It's an occupation. It's something you spend time doing.
Yes.
And if you spend time doing this, it is your occupation. It is your job, and you are a professional.
Like, something that's hard sometimes for me to get across in my family is like, this isn't just a hobby. This is something that I am doing, that I want to do for money.
Yes.
And in order to do that, you have to treat it with a level of I think everything that we talked about today is shifting like your mindset, your mentality to a professional sense. Because once you do that, then you start to think like, okay, this isn't a hobby anymore. This isn't just something I like to do. Obviously, I still like to do it, but this is something that will support me. And if I put in that care, the mentality, and the professionalism into it, it will support me.
Yes.
You know?
And if that idea of the filmmaking business is stressful for you, we have a whole series that will be coming out, or if you're listening to this, it may already be out, on the business of filmmaking, starting a production company, and hard logistics
Yes.
about that. But I think for today,
That was enough.
that was good. That's a
There's
lot of
so
content. Producer Shelby is happy is happy
there
with
is you know
what we've
so
done.
much to talk about, and it's very hard to pinpoint where to start, where to begin. But I think we did an okay job at just. I think the biggest thing is the mentality. It's
Yes.
shifting your frame of mind.
So, if you liked this episode, if you liked what you heard, first of all, please give us a follow, if this is kind of your vibe, But also, we have 2 more episodes coming out in this series, one of which talks about being on set for the first time. The last one is going to be about making your first short film and how to actually do that.
Yeah.
So,
Where do you even start with that?
where do you start?
We don't know. Just kidding. We do. Kind of. We're going to tell you what we sort of, our process, right? But yeah.
So thank you very much for tuning in. Again, I'm Cody McLeod-Rogers.
I'm Tristan Au.
And this has been the Best Boys Podcast.
See you later.